This is the Aroid Hour, and we welcome all our friends.
Welcome to Grant and Hi. Thank you so much for joining us in this Aroid Hour and sharing your Anthurium breeding knowledge with us. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourself? And I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. So Grant, why don't you go first?
So I'm Grant. I am the person behind the Anthurium's account and website and everything. I have been growing Anthuriums since I want to say like late 2020, early 2021. It was kind of like a pandemic hobby that I picked up. I started growing a few plants that I had found around in my home office when we had to work from home, and pretty soon I had like a tent that just kind of appeared in the corner of my room one day when my wife walked in. She's like, "What the heck is that?" And then it's just kind of, exploded from there. And yeah, that's me. Professionally, I'm a neuroradiologist. I'm based out of St. Petersburg, Florida. And so this is kind of my escape from more sterile clinical duties. But of course, like all my hobbies, it's just kind of turned into this huge thing that just kind of encompasses all of my extra free time now. So it's almost become another job. But
I didn't catch the bit where you said you're a radiologist. You said a word before that.
Oh, neuroradiologist. I'm subspecialized in neuroradiology.
So is that like brain scans and stuff?
Yeah. I have a focus on brain and spine and stuff like that, but still read it. You still read everything. It's just kind of like an extra little focus.
Interesting. Are you a member of the IAS? Yeah.
I am, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Hi. Please.
Thanks, Grant. My name is Hi. Yeah, call me Hi. In Siri. I'm from Australia and Vietnam. Similar to Grant, I kind of just started this as a hobby when COVID happened. I started growing philodendrons and monsteras and alocasias first. I actually never got into Anthuriums until probably 2 years after, so around like 2022. That's probably when I first got my Anthurium. And I'm an engineer by background, but now growing Anthurium is my full-time thing. So I've taken it full-time. I've moved from Australia to Vietnam now to expand this hobby. So I'm mainly based in Vietnam now to do all my Anthurium breeding and growing and import and export. Yeah, because Vietnam is a much easier country to do all of this.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's me briefly.
Maybe for the reason why it's easier, I guess because the import and export regulations for Australia are like really tough.
Yeah.
Impossible.
It's very tough. The only thing that I've been able to import to Australia are seeds.
Okay.
Yeah, not plants. In terms of exporting from Australia is a lot easier because they're not CITES plants. They're just house plants, so you can just kind of take them out, 1 or 2 plants, make sure there's no soil in there, just clean moss, clean roots, and no one really says anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question for Lester. This is going to be a weird question, but I mean, I'm one of those people who got into aroid. Excuse me?
The answer is 3.
Okay. Like, as both Hi and Grant, I didn't get into aroid collecting until the pandemic hit. And I find it so fascinating how so many of the people of our generation, well, I'm probably a generation older than Hi and Grant, but how quickly we did these deep dives. And I was wondering if, like, back in the day, when you were president of the IAS and had other roles, Did people do these deep dives as quickly?
No,
No.
no, the back in initially, there were the same mix of professional nurserymen, I guess would be the right term, and horticulturists, just being the hobbyists, but also botanists. But there weren't any real meetings. This was telemeetings were not heard of.
Mm.
So there was one meeting once a year with maybe 70, 80 people meeting in the room at Fairchild Tropical Garden. And that was it. And so there were no there were no communications other than Aroid Hour, which was quite active at the time. And that was about it.
Okay, interesting.
Recognize that the IAS has grown a little bit from 300 or 400 members to what is now.
Little bit. A little bit.
Hey, I've got a question to Hailey. What are
Yeah.
the tell us about the more impressive endemic aroids of Vietnam?
Endemic. Well, there's no Anthuriums in Vietnam.
Well, yeah, wrong hemisphere.
I would think that they're begonias. So in Vietnam, there are a lot of begonias that are not even described. I'm not very knowledgeable about begonia, so I'm not sure which.
And impatiens also. But how about alocasia?
Mm,
Morphophallus.
Alocasia, I don't know much about as well. I'm sorry. I'm just feeling very embarrassed right now. Alocasias, I don't know. Like the only alocasias that I see are the ones that, you know, like are on the road, on the bush, or like are grown for food in Vietnam. I don't know much about alocasias in Vietnam, unfortunately. Sorry.
Okay. There are also some really impressive impatiens in Vietnam.
Right.
But I look, as you begin to discover it, I look forward to hearing from you.
Sure. I hope I am actually falling back into the alocasia collecting, but a lot of the alocasias that I have been collecting, there are newer hybrids, not species.
That's interesting. I'd really love to get into cooking with alocasia, but I'm not quite sure that the alocasia I can get here are of the cooking quality. Question for Grant. Since you're a radiologist, what do you think about plants being treated with radiation to create variegation?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about that and, you know, some other like chemical induction mechanisms. Yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't love the idea of it. I think there's something a little bit more special about spontaneous variegation and mutations being cultivated. I don't know that I feel strongly enough about it to be like necessarily adamantly against it. I just think that I favor things that are happening spontaneously. But it does seem like we're getting a lot more variegation coming out of certain areas than seems natural, and so it's probably going on. You know, not just radiation, but, you know, chemical means as well, like EMS and things like that. So, but I have to be honest, I don't know a ton about the, you know, how they do that and kind of what other effects that it has, but.
So you're not sneaking into the hospital with a crate of plants and playing around with the machines?
Not yet. I think that you'd need a lot more than like an X-ray worth of radiation to cause these mutations. So I would probably need some sort of experimental type device to do that. But But yeah, at the current time, no, I'm not sneaking my Anthuriums into the lab to induce crazy mutations.
That was a joke. I hope you know that.
Yes, I do.
For both of you, somebody asked what got you interested in breeding Anthurium.
You go, Grant.
Yeah, I mean, to me, so similar to High, I think everyone kind of, well, not everyone, but most people start out growing a few different things. You know, I grew philodendrons. I really like the climbing forms like varicosum and stuff like that. I grew monstera. I grew some alocasia. And so what really led me to focus in on Anthuriums, besides the fact that I was having to like top cut my climbing philodendrons like every 2 weeks, and it was driving me crazy, was the like wide variety of like very visible traits that you can get out of them. And so I just, when I learned that you could hybridize these plants so easily, I immediately wanted to do that because, you know, the spectrum of traits, like different plants, some have contrast veins, some don't have contrast veins, the differences in the shapes, the differences in the lobes. And then even once you start to get, you know, deeper into the whole, like even plants that have contrast veins can look so different from each other just based on, you know, missing a basal vein here or secondary veins, things like that just cause such dramatic changes in the way it looked. It just, to me, it's just infinite possibilities for hybridization. And that's really what made me want to do that. You know, I don't want to, there's kind of a phenomenon that I call plant blindness, where like when you're not aware of plants, like you kind of look out, people can look out in a, you know, in a landscape and everything just looks like green blobs. My wife, for example, she's not as into plants as I am, but she's starting to get into it. But like she tells me like, yes, you're right. Like now I look in the landscape and I'll see, you know, a cycad or a palm and different plants. I think it's the same thing in all these different little niches as we dive into. Like when I first started out, I thought the same thing, you know, like Anthurium magnificum, Anthurium crystallinum, Anthurium carolbachia, they look so similar. Like I didn't get it. And then like as I started diving in and handling the plants in person and seeing the differences in leaf thickness and all these other things, I really get it. So I think it's the same thing with other aroids. So I just wanted to caveat that before I said, like, I don't know that you have this same wide diversity of traits to play with in other genus like monstera and philodendron. You know, you can definitely make hybrids that have different leaf shapes and things like that, but just the wide spectrum of traits you have to play with in Anthuriums, mixed with how easy they are to hybridize and how quickly they turn over seeds, you can just make these massive progress over very short periods of time, which is very satisfying. You know, you can turn over a whole generation of something like a carolbachia or BVP in just a year, from seed to seed. So I feel like that combination of things is what really, you know, drove me into it initially and has kind of kept me in it. And I think that's what makes it so appealing for so many people that are coming into it now too, because they're realizing like, hey, this is something I can do in, you know, a few square feet in my room or my closet.
Yeah, for me, I share a very similar journey with Grant. The main thing for me is because that the ease of hybridizing them, of storing the pollen for later use, of how relatively small they have to be in order to start breeding. They don't have to get huge or big like philodendron or monsteras. And the fact that their pollen are like dry powder form, they're much easier to store and work with. Yeah, the rest is history. It's just like fun, a lot of possibilities, a lot of cross-sectional breeding that you can still do, even though, you know, they're not in the same section. Yeah, I think that's how really got me like shift my preference in. I did try to hybrid philodendrons and alocasias before, but never successful. But with Anthurium, they just take, and you feel like you've achieved something. You feel rewarded, and once you feel rewarded, you start getting excited, and you want to see what's going to come out of those seeds. And the return, like Grant said, you can turn a generation within a year. It's quick enough so that you don't have to be super crazy patient to wait for it. You can see the result in such a short time, so it's very rewarding. And at the same time, the reward is not just about making a new plant or a new hybrid. It's also about, like financially, if you can make a really nice hybrid, you can always trade it or sell it, and and it keeps your hobby alive, sustain your hobby.
We'll get into the commercial aspect in a bit.
Yeah.
But to what both of you just said, I have two questions. Like, as a collector, I don't know much about all the different things that we do in plant breeding, or plant production, if you will. But I do know that TC Labs have protocols, and I was wondering, do you, as Anthurium breeder, do you have like your own protocol? Is there something like a trade secret to it, if you will, like your best practices, etc., without spilling them? Just yeah.
I also, another reason why I prefer Anthuriums is because the speed at which you can create a new Anthurium, a new hybrid, is a lot faster than TC Labs can clone them or copy them.
Okay.
By the time they're able to copy your hybrid, it'll take them like a year and a half or two. And by that time, you're already able to move to the next few generations down.
Okay.
In that sense, in terms of like the business aspects of it, it protects your hybrid a lot better. Like TC can't take over you in a sense.
Yeah.
Unless it's something that that will do really well in the the regular market, then you would probably put that hybrid into TC to get it mass produced and sell it at like Bunnings or Home Depot or
Right.
That's a good point, and it's kind of similar to what I tell people. I get asked this question a lot. If I'm like, we're worried about TC, and I don't think it's ever like reasonable to be worried about like plants becoming more accessible and cheaply. That's just kind of the natural progression of things. But Hai's point is very valid in that not only is it fast to create new hybrids or derivatives of those plants that are being tissue cultured, but they're also very easy to prop. And so honestly, I think that most of the time with most of these plants, by the time these TC releases are happening so far, the plants have already kind of naturally fallen to around the values where you would have probably good margins to sell them anyway. So for example, like a Delta Force type plant, a lot of people have Delta Force now. A lot of people have propped it. A lot of people have distributed it. And so the difference between buying a propagation from the original plant and buying a tissue culture that is small, fragile, and potentially isn't the correct plant, as we've been finding, as a lot of these grow out, because a lot of these labs were desperate to hurry up and get to market first. And they weren't really like, either they didn't do their due diligence to figure it out, or they didn't care. So it kind of like takes the legs out of TC a little bit. But also, like Hai said, like the rate at which we're able to turn out new interesting hybrids and kind of keep innovating kind of stays ahead of that. But to your other question about like a protocol, I think everybody has their own protocols. It's just kind of natural how it kind of evolves naturally as you create your setup, and it expands, and you tweak here, you tweak there, everything you do to try to increase your own efficiency. As far as like what fertilizers I use and what substrates I use, all that stuff, none of that's proprietary. I had people who helped me out a lot when I first got into the hobby. People like Bunny, that a lot of people know, on on Instagram. She's not as active now. My friend Juan, Amada, they both helped me out a ton, kind of showed me how they grow. I've taken things that they showed me and just adapted them to my own setup. And I've been very transparent with people about what I do. Everybody who asks me knows, what fertilizers I use, what I use semi-hydro growing strategy for everything. I'll tell them, what substrate I use, what's in my pond. None of that's proprietary. The protocol that works best for you is always going to be the one that you can be most consistent with. The secret ingredient isn't like some sort of little chemical that I drop into my thing and I don't tell anybody about, like in my little magic brew. It's that I've set up everything so that I can be consistent with it. The biggest key to success for anthuriums is just unwavering consistency. For me, that means growing in semi-hydro and pond and tree fern fiber, which also works well in semi-hydroponics, because I'm able to take care of an enormous amount of plants compared to what I would be able to if I was trying to individually, dose water to 1,000 different plants in Aroid mix, for example. Is Aroid mix good for anthuriums? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Could someone probably grow a bigger plant than me outdoors in perfect conditions in an Aroid mix in a giant pot? Absolutely. But for me, I can take care of all this crazy number of plants in here in semi-hydro and pond because all I got to do, fill the trays for the seedlings. I have 4 seedling trays in each big giant tray. So I eliminate that's a quarter of the watering I would have to do for individual trays. All of my mother plants are in self-watering pots. So all I have to do is watch a gauge. I don't have to check soil, check soil weights or check soil moisture and try to guess here and there. That's the key for me. So do whatever you can be really consistent with, whatever that is. And just know that anthuriums will punish you for inconsistency. And the trickiest part about anthuriums is they won't show you right away. It'll happen, a couple weeks later, 3 weeks later. And so I'll have a lot of people message me, asking me to troubleshoot things all the time on Instagram and stuff like that. And they're like, nothing happened, like everything's perfect. It looked perfect. And then I was like, well, did anything happen, like 2-3 weeks ago? Oh yeah, well, I was out of town and so my friend couldn't stop by and water them and they all dried out. And I came back and was like, well, that's it. And not that people shouldn't live their lives. I'm just trying to say, like, there's not really a secret recipe outside of just keeping these plants in the general conditions that they like. You just got to be consistent.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree with Grant on that. That's pretty much my approach as well to growing Anthurium. I'm pretty open in sharing my knowledge and the style that I grow and what I use, the growing technique that I do, the type of lights I do. I'm pretty open with that to everyone, and I also really agree with Grant on the consistency point. Yeah, I think with all plants, consistency works well for all plants.
Yeah.
What else was I going to talk about? Sorry, I kind of just had a bit of a brain glitch there. Knowledge.
Come back to you.
You got to be consistent, but as well, you got to be knowledgeable about how plants grow. Like how they grow, what part of the plant is, how they photosynthesize, what kind of nutrients they use, what kind of media works for them. And together with consistency, it will work. There is no secret way to grow the plant as long as, you kind of test things out, whatever works best for your environment. Your growing style, your time that you have. If that all works, then just keep doing the same thing, and the plant will be fine. Yeah.
Do you Anthurium breeders swap pollen and stuff? Is there that kind of collaboration among you guys? Not specifically between you two, but because
me and Grant has traded before.
We did, yeah. We've met a couple times.
Awesome.
Pretty good trades, yeah. And I visited Grant's when he was still at the old place, and I bought heaps of stuff from Grant when I first started. He was kind of my like a celebrity to me at the time when I met him. Like, wow, this blows my mind.
Well, you coming over from all the way over there to my little garage grow setup made me feel like a celebrity. It was very weird. It was very weird to me at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's traveling all across the world and he's coming to my place. So it was mutual feeling.
Yeah.
I see the hearts flying. I see the heart flying. What do you look for in a plant when you're looking to breed it? Like, what are some of the traits or even like, do you start by checking or ensuring like that the section is compatible?
I think I don't actually look at sections anymore now. I kind of just do it because the amount of pollen I collect and the amount of flowers that pop out, just do it. I just kind of just put the pollen on and hope for the best, and most of the time it works.
Okay. So it's just a magic touch, not so much research.
Yeah, and you got to collect and imagine, and there are quite a few fails, which I still try to do it. Still cross my fingers every time I do it. The amount of pollens I put on all my blood moons, like it's a lot. I have about like 30 blood moon mother plants now that I still consistently put pollen on.
You're giving me really, really stupid ideas, because right now my Bessie is flowering and my Wendlingerii is flowering, and I've been looking at them and I'm like, if I could get that to work, but I probably
yeah. So like when I breed, when I start the breeding, I think the most important thing that I do first is I got to make sure that the plant is fully matured and healthy.
How do I know that? Like sure.
It starts flowering. The flower is long and big. The plant has at least 6 or 7 leaves. Big, strong plants, and just do your research to see, for example, like Magnificum, what's the biggest leaf size that you can kind of like.
I'm going to put up a poll. I want to know from the people here listening whether or not they've attempted to breed. I'll have a poll. You can access that. Meanwhile, Grant, did you want to answer that question about what you look for in a plant before you breed it?
Yeah, I mean, so he touched on a few, good points. Maturity for sure, and I would add that some species, and you get a feel for all this stuff just by growing these plants. But for people growing things to flowering size the first time, it can be tricky to navigate because it's a question that comes up a lot. But stuff like Carla Blackier, Dressleri, Antilocii, they will flower pretty much on their very, very first cataphyll leaf. So you can have a really small plant that's flowering. I usually snap that flower off as soon as it comes out because I want the plants to just continue to focus on foliage growth and growing up. You could potentially pollinate those, but you'll get pretty low yield if you even get a real receptive and pollen phase, which sometimes you won't. And it's gonna be a tiny inflow, small yield, and you might slow that plant down. And I find that most of the time it makes more sense to let it put out a few cataphyll leaves and really size up, because there's kind of a misconception that cataphyll is like maturity, but there's a lot more maturation that happens with Anthuriums, like far beyond cataphyll for a while. So like Hai alluded to, the flowers will get bigger. You'll see that the peduncle will start to get much thicker. The spadix will be longer. They hit a couple other steps of like kind of beefing up, if that makes sense. And once you start to see those changes happen, I think it starts to be more safe to pollinate them without setting them back. As far as what I look for breeding and touching on kind of the cross-sectional thing, I agree with Hai. If you've got the plants there and you think that they could make something cool, try it. I've already kind of pre-screened for sections for the most part, just in my collection. Most of my collection is plants that I know are compatible. I mostly focus on section Cardiolonchium, so the nice velvet leaf plants, Dresslery, BVP, Carla, stuff like that, Bessier. So I already kind of have that built in. Most of my plants I know are compatible. I also then keep a few out of section plants that I think have really cool traits, and I have seen can cross sectionally breed. So I have Clarinervium hybrids like Delta Force, King of Clarinervium, and then I have stuff like Pallidiflorum. I recently did a cross with Carla Blacki and
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Pallidiflorum, and so which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not opposed to doing cross-sectional stuff. It's fun. You just have to be ready for a couple things to come up. One, a lot of times you're going to get small yields. A lot of times out of those yields, you're going to get poor germination rates. The ones that germinate out of those, you're going to get a lot of runts a lot of times. This doesn't always happen. Some out-of-section crosses just kind of line up perfectly the universe, and you get a bunch, like my Carla Pallid cross that I was just talking about. I got a bunch of them. So many so actually that I'll kind of touch on another thing. I always make sure that I grow these out and they actually look like what they're supposed to be, especially when the seed parent is the unusual plant. Particularly when it's like a section endophyllum plant like Clarinervium or something like that, because those plants have a tendency to self-pollinate. I will usually grow these out and make sure they look like it. The Carla Pallid cross very much looks like what you would expect it to look like, so I'm happy with that. It was weird. I got a ton of them. Usually it doesn't happen when I go out of section. But the Clary types especially are a big problem that I see a lot, because people will say, hey, I made Clarinervium X whatever, Doc Block, and they got a bunch of them, and then they're growing them out and they look like Clary selves. And so those section endophyllum plants will actually start making pollen while they're still receptive. And so they have a tendency to pollinate themselves on the same inflow. And people aren't really aware of that. The section Cardiolonchium stuff usually has like a nice little interval buffer period where they stop making stigmatic fluid, and then the pollen phase comes later. And so they kind of block that from happening, but that's not the case with those other plants. So your Delta Forces, your Clarinervium, stuff like that, definitely try those crosses. They happen. I've done them. Other people have done them, but grow them out and make sure that they don't just look like selves, I would say. I feel like I've been talking for a while now, so I don't know if I don't remember what the original question was, but
You're doing fine. We have another question. Do you find that breeding with variegated mother plants produces more variegation in seedlings?
I believe so. I've done it before, and it works. Yeah, especially if the mother is variegated. Seeds, even the mother's flower goes variegated, and the seeds will come out with a much higher chance of variegation if the mother's variegated.
Okay. What about you,
Yeah.
Grant?
yeah, for sure. For sure, I've seen that, especially with certain plants. It probably depends a little bit on what the genetic basis of the variegation is of the plant. We don't have proof of this, but it is kind of like a concept that is true. But like, it kind of makes sense. There's like plants have a chloroplast DNA that's kind of like the analog to mitochondrial DNA in humans, and it's only passed on by the mother. And so conceivably, if the mutation for variegation that a plant possesses happens to be on the chloroplast DNA, it would make sense that it would be much higher rates as the mother plant than as the pollen donor. And so in a lot of these plants, especially like the ones that look like, a lot of people are familiar with this variegated Thai pap that it's called. It's just very like round pap hybrid that has like yellowish sectoral variegation. Everyone's seen it. It's probably involved in like 50% of the variegated hybrid crosses in the world right now, honestly, because it's just so prolific. But if you put it as the pollen donor with another non-variegated plant, you'll get almost nothing. But as the mother plant, it's very prolific. But again, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the rule with every plant. We see variegated plants coming from mother plants that are not variegated at all, but they produce a lot of variegated offspring consistently. We see some plants as the pollen donor will lead to some higher rates of variegated offspring, but it definitely, if you're just buying a plant blind and you want to have a good chance of getting a variegated offspring from it, I would say you're taking a big risk if the variegated parent is the pollen donor.
Okay. So another question. Thank you everybody for typing your questions into the Q&A section. It's really helping me keep track of what was answered and not. Is there a species or cultivar that is difficult for you but seems easier for others?
Yeah, I've got a few. The bane of my existence when I was first starting out was specifically dark forgetii, which is a beautiful plant. Most people have no problem growing any forgetii, and it sounds so dumb when I say this, but like I cannot keep one alive to save my life. I get them from Equa a couple times now. They look beautiful. They're rooted, no problems. Throw them in semi-hydro. They do well for a few leaves, and then just like out of nowhere, just catastrophic collapse, defoliate, dead, like within a couple weeks. I wonder if it has something to do with semi-hydro. Maybe they just really hate it. I have a couple other plants that don't like semi-hydro. A lot of the Indonesian hybrids, the complex Indonesian hybrids, don't like it, especially the ones that have like thicker, succulent-looking roots, like King of Spades doesn't really like semi-hydro. King of Clary, the section Anaphyllum stuff, doesn't love it, but you can kind of like bend them to your will if you kind of slightly modify it, and they'll tolerate it, but they don't love it. So I would say those are my three tricky ones. But forgetii is the one that I really can't explain. The other ones make a little bit more sense. But man, I cannot grow a dark forgetii.
I mean, I'm no breeder, but I can't keep a forgetii happy either. Not even forgetii hybrids, but whatever. Hi, what about you?
I agree with Grant. When you were just like I used to have very limited space to grow my plants, and so I use semi-hydro like Grant. And I do find that when you're growing using that technique, a lot of the like some cultivars, some species just don't like the idea of sitting in nutrient, or having nutrient there all the time, or the type of media. I don't know what it is, but they don't grow well like the others. But now that I've moved away from semi-hydro, I grow them the traditional way of just hand watering in pots. I find that there's less failure.
Okay. Sarah has her hand raised.
On everything, and I can grow things well. They're just slower than semi-hydro or hydroponics, but I find that the plants are more resilient, stronger for exporting.
Maybe they feel like semi-hydro setups are like force feeding them, kind of like we do with geese for foie gras. That's a horrible comparison. Excuse me.
But I find that when I grow them as close as I can to their natural growing behavior, they grow well.
Right.
Yeah.
But that sounds like a Thailand privilege right there, because I wouldn't be able to do
Yeah.
in the Czech Republic.
Like Vietnam, I can like afford to a lot more space and people that work for me that waters them by hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Sarah, what you got? Speak up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not really a question, which is why I didn't add it to the chat or whatever. But I just had a thought when you guys were talking about, I thought the question was in terms of like tissue culture protocol versus reproduction via, like sexual reproduction, pollination type protocols, and maybe what people do for themselves to kind of just keep track of what they're doing or whatever. And I just wanted to, like, I know I'm not the breeder expert person here or whatever, but I do talk to a lot of people who breed anthuriums, and I do myself. And something that I think is really important that a lot of people seem to be a little lax with is like data collection, like keeping track of the crosses that you've done, and making sure that you're like, I have a spreadsheet where it's like, I crossed this with this on this date, and it took this long for the seeds to, or the berries to develop. And then I'll have pictures of what the berries look for each different cross, and whether or not it was successful, because a lot of times, like they were talking about, when you do the intersectional crosses, I will wait like 18 months for these juicy berries, and then I'll open them up, and there's not a single seed in sight, right? Like, it's just the most devastating thing ever, right? So I really find it to be helpful to have a spreadsheet where I'm keeping track of a lot of these things, because sometimes people will be like, I don't know, it's a bench hybrid, I can't remember what I did here or whatever. And it's just really important, I think, for people, for themselves, and for maintaining like accuracy throughout distribution or whatever, to make sure that you're really keeping track of what you do and how long it takes, and that helps you, like remember what you're working with, and whether or not something worked in the past, and you don't want to wait 18 months for parthenocarpic berries again. So that was it. That was the little rant about that.
I can tell you what Yoss does. Yoss is my business partner, but on Instagram, he's Captain Aroid, and he actually is a professional breeder. He built himself an app with Google Apps where he keeps track of that stuff, because he can't stand like Excel sheets. I mean, basically,
Sure.
it's the same thing, just different interface. Yeah. Okay. Did you guys want to add anything to that part, or do we move on to the next question?
No, I think that is a good point. Yeah, you definitely got to keep track of stuff. I just have a bunch of different, I label at every step, and we, when I pollinate the inflow, I add a little tag to that inflow with what I pollinated it with. And then, when we take the berries off into the cups that we process them, those get a label. Take them from the cups into the trays where they germinate. Those, this is redundancy at every step. Just kind of tracking them along the whole path, just to make sure things don't get mixed up, especially when, no matter what I do, the Anthuriums just always seem to get on schedule with each other, and try to drop their berries at the exact same time. So inevitably, like, I won't have anything processing for 3 weeks, and then like 1 week, 5 different plants will all be dropping berries. And so, not labeling and not keeping track of that is just a recipe for disaster, for sure.
You actually bring up something important. Like, the hardest thing for me to figure out when I did one time successfully actually create a hybrid was when to harvest the berries. Like, when the first ones fall off, can I just rip them all off, or do I, like, how do you go about harvesting?
Hi, you're if you want to answer that, you can.
When I first started Anthurium, I would wait for the berries to start popping out, get really ripe. But then I learned that when the berries start doing that, the sugar level in the berries are much higher, and so they ferment, and that affects the seed. So I stopped collecting them when they're ripe. Now I collect them when they're still a tad green.
Okay.
It's harder to pop the seeds out when they're still hard, but the seeds are a lot stronger and they turn green a lot faster than seeds that are collected from ripe berries.
You heard
So
it.
you haven't had any issues with germination or anything like that?
No.
That was always my concern, was like, I was worried that they'd be missing some sort of, chemical signal to kind of like trigger them. But if you're saying you don't have any issues with that, that's very interesting.
Yeah, because I think it was just luck, because I have so many inflows and ripened berries. I just like, okay, let's try this. It works. I tasted the berries. They're not sweet. They're more like starchy. I pop them. I put them. I wash them with soap, with a drop of soap. Wash them really clean. Rinse them with clean water and kind of just lay them in a tray with a little bit of water. And they all will just turn green after like 1 or 2 days, and they germinate really well.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what I learned from my experience. I don't collect them when they're ripe anymore, because if they do get too ripe, they get fermented.
Yeah, definitely if you leave them on there for a while. My only caveat to that would be for newer breeders who maybe aren't familiar with the gestation times and things like that. I would worry that they're going to harvest them maybe too early. But that's really interesting that you say that the germination rates are so high.
I don't even wait for them to pop out anymore now.
Yeah. But you have a lot of experience, so you're kind of familiar with kind of when they're getting close to that stage. Some plants like pap, for example, a month before they're even ready, they'll look very ready. They'll even start turning colors, but they're still very firm. So yeah. I would have trouble myself even guessing when it was time to kind of dig them out.
I kind of just base them on how firm or how the color, the firmness.
Mm-hmm.
And when they starting to turn a bit soft and the color is fully developed, and you can kind of like from experience you can see that the inflorescence is fully developed, popping
Sure.
out, really pregnant. Berries are a bit softer now.
So they're giving but not popping out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have popped berries from really green inflows that snap off. You know, accidents happen. I walk past the flow, it snap off, and it's probably just midway. I still pop them, and they still grow.
Wow.
It's
Okay. Kevin wants to know if you ever tried your berries.
Yes, I once tried one, and I got a very bad allergy reaction from it.
Oh, okay. So we're not going to eat our berries.
Really, really itchy, like super itchy. My whole body got really itchy. My eyes starts to swell up. Yeah, I just jumped in a hot shower and took some antihistamines.
And here I thought we could pop them over our salad. Oh no. Okay. Let's get to the next question. Jennifer asks, are there any characteristics to certain species that you find breed true when hybridizing? Like, do some always get larger leaves, etc.?
I find that from my breeding experience, I find that the following are some characteristics that I find that will show out more. The edges of the petiole, the merged sinus. If I breed with colored black, yay, the silver veins. And shiny leaf will make velvet leaves go waxy.
Okay.
Yeah, so like those are some of the characteristics kind of like are stronger. It will just show out. Yeah. And also if I self a green plant and collect its offsprings and grow them out, there will be offsprings that starts to show red traits on the vein, on the rim, or on the petiole, or on the roots from the green mother plant. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in general, traits, the seed parent traits will tend to be slightly dominant, like generally, not in every single instance. Traits that are very different will tend to show through, like what Hai alluded to, you know, like ribbed or winged petioles. The more like subvelvet or glossy leaves will tend to dominate. Really distinct textural elements like luxe or splendid will tend to dominate. So things that are like very different tend to dominate crosses in my experience. And then you've got things like contrast veins. Like if you mix a primary like hybrid between a contrast vein plant and a plant with more suppressed or muted veins. And by that, I mean something like PAP, BVP, Dresslery. The veins will tend to get muted out. You won't get that silvery look. You'll get more of a green, just like a green slight contrast venation. The combination matters a little bit. So like I've found BVPs a little bit more permissive to silvery veins coming through than something like PAP, which really just like slams them down. But you can bring it back, interestingly, really prominently with like a back cross. So like a couple of myself and a couple others have done like Carla BVP and taken an offspring from that cross and back cross it with Carla. And then you'll get really prominent veins in some of the individuals, even more so than the original Carla parent, which is very interesting. So I think we have a lot of, there's still so much more to play with Anthuriums. It's why they're so interesting. Like things like doing back crosses and like Hai talked about, you know, selfing complex hybrids and just like seeing all the cool, weird stuff you get and then taking those plants and crossing them together. Like there's just infinite things that we can do with them. And it's just really fun.
I recently, it was probably this week, I saw a cross, and I cannot for the life of me remember where I saw it, but it was a very, very, very dark heart-shaped leaf, velvety Anthurium, and the veins, they were like, it was almost like 3D, and they were black. I'm like, what the heck? That was so pretty. But I'm going off topic. We had a question from earlier today. I believe we answered that. It's how do you stay organized? Do you have a specific way of categorizing, keeping growing your Anthurium? I think we covered that. Jennifer asks, following up on staying organized, how many seedlings do you grow out to determine if a hybrid is worth trying again? And how long do you hold on to them to identify characteristics?
Well, for me, it's pretty simple now because I've got growing space, so I grow everything out. I don't throw anything away.
Okay.
And then from that batch, I will select the ones that are, you know, that are aligned to what I like, and then the rest I will just sell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in a little bit different situation space-wise because I'm growing in my garage. I have to make a lot of decisions about, you know, what crosses I'm going to make, how many I'm going to pot up, things like that. So my approach usually is I'll make a cross, and this is assuming like a normal yield. Some crosses, you know, you're going to get like 12 seeds and you don't really have to make a lot of decisions about it. You just grow them all out. But, you know, let's say we got 100 or 150 seeds or something like that. So I'll usually, you know, collect them. I will take the ones that look the most vigorous, pot those up into a cell tray with like 72 cells, grow those out. You know, we sell some at seedling size. And then at each different stage, I'll start to look for traits as they get a little bit more mature. And I'm usually looking for things that are outlier traits. So things that are unusual. When I first started out, I was growing in like, I got kind of stuck in this trap where you take a nice plant and you self it, for example, and you're like, for some reason, we're all looking for ones that look exactly like the mother plant. And at some point I was just like, why am I doing that? I already have the mother plant. I'm going to sell the ones to people who want the mother plant but don't have it, you know, so they're happy. And I'm going to look for ones that look very different. You know, this one's way more narrow. This one has like weird veins that don't make sense. And so I've started keeping all the outliers. Because I want to do different things and kind of split off into different lines and like, so can I emphasize that trait? Or this one's crazy. This one doesn't have any secondary veins. Let me see if I can like isolate that and make more like that. So that's how I've started to select things. So not necessarily looking for just keeping everyone that's nice. I don't want to I'm not hoarding all the nice ones for myself, but I'm keeping like the weird ones aside. And so that's kind of a strategy that I've taken. And I do unfortunately have to make a lot of cuts because I don't have a lot of space. I wish I could grow everything out. But I do end up discarding a lot of ones that are just weak or have very poor traits. Like some just come out with no color for some reason. They're just not very attractive. And you know, those go in the bin. And then I usually keep like a reserve in germination trays. I keep them artificially small in like a tight container. And so if a cross was super popular and people want more of it, and I sold out of it, I can pot up more. Or if I wanted to grow more of them, because I was like, man, this interesting trait is popping up, I want to see if I can get more mother plants with that trait, I'll pot up more of them. And so that's kind of my solution to controlling the size of my growing operation, and keeping it within the confines of the space that I have. So I don't end up with, 10 trays of the same cross when I can only have, 100 trays total at any given time.
We have another question from Vic, and I'm sorry I'm pressing a bit, but we're technically out of time. This one is interesting. You know how we have monozygotic and dizygotic twins? I guess that's 1 egg versus 2 eggs. Do you reckon seeds which come from the same berry would be more likely to be identical?
My understanding is that we know that they aren't.
Okay.
They're not identical.
Are you pro-variegation or anti-variegation? Quick answer.
I grow everything.
I like everything. Yeah.
So, I think I'm not anti-variegation. I kind of just prefer non-variegated plants more.
Okay. I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure.
I like a touch of variegation.
I find variegation sometimes detracts rather than adds to the interest of the plant.
It definitely can. What I found is like, I don't like variegation for the sake of variegation. So what I've been trying to focus on is like, making plants variegated crosses that you would want the plant even if it wasn't variegated. So I think there's a lot of variegated plants that the only interest is that they have different color on them, but the actual plant itself, if it were to revert, you would be like, what is this? I don't want this. And so I've been trying to find things, trying to make crosses that I would want it anyway, and also look for interesting variegation patterns, colors, pinks, oranges, reds, really cool sectoral patterns, more camouflage looking patterns, areas of mixed sectoral and mint. Those are things that I think are really interesting, rather than just kind of like all Aurea sectoral variegation mag hybrids, which to me aren't very interesting.
Is there a repository / tracking system that allows you to track names, hybrids, consistently across the various generations?
I keep a huge spreadsheet of all the hybrids I do with their mothers.
Okay, but there's nothing like out of the box that an Anthurium breeder might use?
I don't think you can find like a centralized solution to that, because everyone has their own conventions, and there's no way for any, authority or organization to track that or verify that or anything like that. We have the IAS cultivar registry, but like what 0.00001% of all named plants at this point are in that. So, and we can't expect IAS to track like thousands and thousands of Anthurium breeders all across the world.
80 Florida Street says, my actual name is Bob. Google me. Oh, that's not a question. Alex added in the chat, how long do you leave seeds in the water? Do you wait to see them germinate, or do you take them out before they do?
I've left them as long as like 3 or 4 weeks, and I could see roots popping out, and they still grow.
Yeah, if they're clean, you can leave them indefinitely. Just change the water once in a while.
How do you clean them? Do you use like peroxide or something, or just soap? Or
I used to use peroxide, but now I kind of just use clean, like tap water and a drop of soap, and just massage them, and so that they're the clear bag of this, what do you call them, Grant?
I just call it pulp. I don't know what the scientific name for it is. But
so I just massage him, rub him as much as I can. I just like fill water in. The pulp will float, and you can pour them out, and the seeds will sink. Yeah. And I just do that like 2 or 3 times. Rinse them again with clean water, and
exactly.
Leave them.
The cleaning is really more the physical removal of that, like flesh pulp that can be like a substrate for for the fungus and bacteria that will kind of ferment it.
Correct.
It's not so much,
Yeah.
you can use whatever you want to like soap or whatever, as long as it's not too harsh. But I don't use any soap or anything. I just use water, and I use paper towels to kind of abrade
Yeah.
because some certain species, especially or crosses, like that stuff, that little flesh will be very adherent to the seeds, and you really have to work to get it off. So
Very super.
that's the number one thing you can do to keep your seeds from rotting is really make sure that they're clear of any of that
Yeah.
substance.
Interesting. Well, it's 5
And
after the hour. I'm going to give each of you maybe 2 more minutes in case you want to share anything else. Tip of the day. Maybe you want to give a shout out to one of your fellow breeders who do great work that's different from yours. Stage is yours. Let's wrap it up.
Grant, do you want
Yeah, I didn't really have any closing comments prepared.
Yeah.
I think I've talked enough or more than enough during this already. I feel like I've been blabbering the whole time. So, no, I just appreciate the opportunity. It's cool. Check us out. Granthuriums on Instagram and also granthuriums.com website. And I'm always open to, trying to answer questions and troubleshooting and things like that in my DMs on Instagram. Although they are getting pretty crowded, so it might take me a few days nowadays, but don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, I just want to really thank you for the opportunity as well to share and talk. I'll be at PlantCon Houston. I'm flying out tomorrow, so if you go to the event, we can definitely talk more about plants and Anthurium.
Will we see you guys at the IAS Expo in September in Miami?
Yes, we'll be coming.
I always hope to be there. It just depends on my work schedule. So fingers crossed. I probably won't be vending, but I like to just attend and hang out.
Fingers crossed for us. And it's cute that you guys said thank you, that we're having you, but really thanks goes the other way. Thank you for making the time and for spending this hour with us and sharing your knowledge and everything you have to say about Anthurium so generously. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody in the audience had a great time. I see there's 2-3 more questions that we didn't get around to answer. Who knows? Maybe we'll do it again, or just, hit these guys up on their Instagram. They will keep a lookout for your questions. I'm putting that on you. All right. Thank you so much. And in 2 months, I'll see you again, and we'll be talking about how to prepare for a plant show. I hope you'll have a wonderful weekend. Be happy, be healthy, and see you next time.